Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a neighbor abused my private property as his personal trash dumping ground. He repeatedly trespassed and ended up in a bear trap only to then call the police on me. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. The title story starts like this. When I first moved into the house I currently live in, one of my first tasks was to sort out the forestry around my house. Each house in this area was allocated forest land that was purchased alongside the house, and the land was sectioned off by a low-lying fence. It was more a way to ensure everyone knows where their boundaries are as opposed to keeping people out. Anyway, along the far right of my forestry property was heaps of rubbish. The rubbish was all on my side of the fence, and at the time I really had no idea how it got there, so I called a skip and got it all taken away. The house had been on the market for years before I bought it, so I had no idea how long said trash had been there. Soon, however, I started to realize that the trash kept coming back. At first I thought it might have been separate piles and that I hadn't seen it, but after a while I knew something else must be happening. I knew at some point I wanted to set up cameras around my property, mainly to get the occasional video of the wildlife, so I figured I might as well do it now, and that way I can also find out how the trash keeps appearing on my property. Not even a day after setting up the cameras and I figured it out. My neighbor has been putting all his trash onto my property. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, considering the fact that nobody had lived here for years and he might not have known that somebody moved in. But then again, who dumps their trash in an area where it's obvious wildlife is present and could easily be harmed by it? I decided to go over and tell him to stop. "Hey, I just moved in next door," I greeted once he opened his door. I didn't want to come as confrontational straight away. "I know, I've seen you," he replied, so I guess he didn't care to dump his trash over the fence even when knowing someone was living there. "I was just coming to see if you wouldn't mind not putting your trash over the fence and onto my property," I stated, still not trying to sound confrontational. The only response I got was an eye roll and then the slam of his door. I hoped he would stop even without his verbal agreement, but I was wrong. The trash still built up day after day. A week later, I put up some no trespassing signs as he often trespasses onto my property in order to dump his trash. I hoped the signs would act as a deterrent, but still no luck. Around the same time I put up the signs, our area was given warnings of a recent influx of bears roaming the area, and we were advised to set up bear traps. I did so and even bothered to go around to my neighbor's house and tell him, hoping he would stop trespassing. The following day after I had set up the traps, I was working from home when I heard a loud scream coming from outside. Rushing out, I saw the scream was coming from my neighbor who had his foot jammed in one of my bear traps. "You tried to kill me!" he screamed in between his shouts of pain. I quickly got on the phone for an ambulance. I'll be honest, I was a little nervous about the outcome. I have not had many dealings with the law and was not sure who would look like the bad guy in this situation. I went in the ambulance with my neighbor feeling guilty about the whole ordeal. It was not long before we got to the hospital and luckily he was not seriously injured. The traps had broken skin, but there was no injuries beyond that. "I hope you know I'm calling the police," my neighbor stated as the pain meds started to kick in. "What for?" "You were trespassing on my land," I replied, feeling anger starting to bubble. "You obviously were purposefully trying to hurt me. I'm not an idiot, and I'll be pressing charges for these medical costs," he responded. I was about to respond, but then a nurse came in to check on his wounds and I didn't want to make her uncomfortable by our arguing. I stepped out of the room, deciding to sit in a chair right outside the room. 20 minutes later, some police officers arrived and went inside the room. I followed. "That's him! He set up bear traps on my property and hit them well," I heard my neighbor lie, pointing at me as I walked in. "First of all, it was not on your property, and secondly, you know we're having a bear problem at the moment. And lastly, I told you about the traps," I seethed, reaching into my pocket to get my phone, which had the security camera footage of my neighbor going over my fence and trespassing on my property. "Cannot argue with that," one of the officers stated. "Would you like to press charges for the trespass?" "Yes, I would," I stated firmly. I did not press for much, only for the cost of the trap and the skip service that I had to use to remove his trash. I just wanted to do this to teach him a lesson. Thinking I had heard the last of it, I let my mind ease slightly. That is until I got a letter through the door informing me that I'd been called to court by my neighbor. I hired a lawyer even though I was sure I would not even need one and went to court. So you are suing your neighbor neglect of property and failing to inform you that they were dangerous traps set up around the perimeter of his property? The judge questioned. Yes, I also wish to be fully reimbursed for the hospital fees, my neighbor replied. We have some evidence of purposeful trespass which would contradict the claims of neglect, my lawyer stated, passing the judge my phone with the security footage loaded up. Well, what do you have to say to this? The judge sighed, staring at my neighbor. What? That doesn't mean anything. The bear traps were so dangerous the no trespassing signs don't mean anything, he stuttered frantically. So you saw the no trespassing signs? The judge interjected, and I rejoiced at seeing the look on my neighbor's face as he realized he had messed up. Long story short, I countersued for a restraining order, which I was able to get fairly easily. My neighbor was told he was gonna be on a fast track to prison if he carries on trespassing or dumping his trash on my property. Although the trash problem stopped, my neighbor certainly did not seem to think that he had finished with me. As I woke up one morning and headed outside to get in my car, I saw that the tires had been slashed and the body of the car had been keyed. I rang the police straight away and started logging onto my security cameras that are more pointed towards the front of the house where my car was parked overnight. I already knew what I was gonna see, but I figured I would check anyway. Sure enough, my neighbor had taken it upon himself to get revenge by damaging my car. Once the police arrived, I showed them the footage and filed a report with them. We then went over to my neighbor's house. You are being arrested on accounts of trespassing, vandalizing, and breaking the rules of your restraining order, the officer stated, walking through the doorframe and putting my neighbor's hands behind his back. What? You cannot do this! I'm innocent, he must have damaged his own car, my neighbor yelled. I said nothing about a car, the officer responded, and my neighbor's face fell once more as he realized he had again let more slip out than intended. The officer left my neighbor leaning against a cop car, which was a mistake as my neighbor took a lunge for me and knocked me to the ground. He used his head and made a move to smash it into mine, but I quickly rolled out from under him, so instead he crashed his face onto the concrete and knocked himself out. Overall, he was given 5 years in prison for his crimes as well as being forced to pay for the damages done to my property. All I can hope now is that by the time the 5 years are over, he decides he no longer wants to live next door to me. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, that was truly a nightmare neighbor for whom the word logic is probably not part of the dictionary. What a stupid person, honestly. Anyway, if you enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to like the video and maybe leave some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. Thank you so much, and now let's move on to the next one, which is titled Bad Review Revenge. I recently attended a friend's wedding a few hours away from home, and the girlfriend and I decided to get an Airbnb so she could bring her dog. We found a nice place that allowed pets, took off early from work, and arrived Friday late afternoon. About 30 minutes later, the owner shows up to see how we are doing while we have the dog on the porch. We make some small talk and he mentions that we didn't indicate we were bringing a dog. I felt bad as it was an honest mistake and I'd never lied to someone to get out of paying the pet fee. We tell him that and offer to pay the $25 fee on the spot. He refuses to take the money and says that he loves dogs and eventually heads out. We don't think too much else about it, but when we leave, we decide to give the place a much more thorough cleaning than was in the instructions. The dog did not chew any furniture or leave any other damage or mess, at least that we didn't clean up. In our minds, the trip was a success and the Airbnb was a great fit. I got the email from them to leave a review and I left a 5-star review and said the house and the owner were great. But then I saw his review of me and a private message where he blasted me for not telling him that I was bringing a dog. How dogs caused them so much more work and how we shouldn't leave dogs alone in the house. This did not sit well with me at all, since I thought we had handled this person to person when he came by on first day. I was and I still am happy to pay for the pet fee, and there was no indication anywhere on the posting that we couldn't leave the dog alone for a few hours while we were at a wedding. Nor did he say that while we chatted and told him we were here for a wedding. For him to post that on my Airbnb profile felt like a cheap shot. I responded to him that in the chat and said as much, and while Airbnb couldn't do anything about the review since it didn't violate any of their policies, my girlfriend did point out that hosts are not supposed to show up to the property unannounced. I had no idea and figured this was his property and he is allowed to show up at least to check in with the guests. Normally, I would not care, especially since it was a very cordial interaction, but since he took a cheap shot with my review, I decided to do the same. I reached out to Airbnb support to tell them about his unannounced visit and they forwarded it to their security team. I answered a few questions about the interaction and they spoke to him. A week or so later they let me know that he was in violation of their policy and they refunded me 2 out of 3 days of the stay, which came out to about $200. All of this because of a bad review. And the next one is titled Malicious Compliance Revenge, and it is an XXL story, so please be sure to listen until the very end. So I used to work as a food receiver in a retirement home kitchen. I won't say the name, but I'll say it sounds vaguely Nordic. When I took over as food receiver in the primary kitchen, I didn't have much training. I was just told, you helped the previous guys, you know the most, job is yours now. And then over the next almost 8 years, I got that place maximized for peak use of space. Every now and then we would get a new head chef and they always made the mistake of trying to run it like a restaurant. Usually in about 2 weeks they would realize that it was a different vibe and tone and adjust accordingly. Had a great head chef as a boss for about 5 years. He knew that since deliveries were food and to some degree perishable, my schedule needed to be a little fluid and flexible to account for late deliveries while not having me rack up overtime. We worked out a great system where I basically set my own hours and got everything done. Fast forward to a regime change. Head chef was a tool, but with him came a woman whose job title was never told to any of us in the kitchen, we were just told she outranked all of us. First thing she did was decide that I would no longer have a fluid schedule, my shifts would be posted on the board like all the others 2 weeks in advance. I didn't like it, but okay, fair enough. Cut to about 2 weeks later, I had to leave early for a dentist appointment. That had been submitted and approved months ago, mind you. I reminded her the day before and day off, day after, she gives me a dressing down and a written reprimand for leaving before the end of the scheduled shift. She told me she didn't care what happened before, she never had papers for this request. Luckily for me, the head of entire dining department, even above head chef, told her that she had been given all those time off approved papers when she started, and if my shift did not reflect that, my pre-approved leaving early, it was her fault for not paying attention. Unluckily, she decided to take it out on me, saying that from now on, once the schedule is posted, no changes unless it's in writing and signed by both of us minimum of 2 days prior. No exceptions. I looked at the calendar and saw that I would get to have fun and get payback. See, being a food receiver, a monthly job of mine was to do end-of-month inventory on all food, beverage and cleaning items. I'd actually created the inventory paperwork myself, so instead of being alphabetical, the items were all listed together based on which area they were stored in. Dishwasher, chemical closet, freezer, dry food storage, soda syrup room, etc. Meaning after a few months I could go room to room quickly and be done in less than 2 hours. The catch was it had to be done either last thing last day of a month or first thing first day of a month. And could not do 2 in the same month with no weekend deliveries. I worked Monday to Friday. Now, under the old cool head chef, if I had to do it on a Saturday or Sunday, I would just come in and do it. Then leave early on a slow day, cancelling extra hours, and lo and behold, this was one of those months. Where inventory would have to be done on a Saturday or Sunday, days she had me down as off on the calendar, I grinned like Tim Curry and Grinch in Home Alone 2 and waited. Sure enough, last Friday of the month, she asks me, "Which day are you coming in to do inventory?" I told her I wasn't and I was scheduled off. She goes into a tirade about, "It's your job, you don't tell me no, I will have you written up," etc. I calmly told her making the schedule was her job and responsibility, not mine. This earned me, "I don't care what the schedule says, you're coming in this weekend." To which I sweetly and sarcastically asked if she had a paper signed by both of us and dated no later than yesterday about us agreeing to this switch. "You know," I said, "the policy you created when you get called out by head office for not properly handling my scheduled early shift? If smartphones had been commonly around in 2009, I would have taken a picture of her face. I found out from the weekend crew it took her almost an entire day to do it herself. That was first of many times she found out that fun way that about half the tasks I did under the old regime were technically not required by my work position, I just did them when I had extra time to help a boss I respected. Update to the story, some of you have asked to hear more about the head chef mentioned in passing. I will add the first and short instance now, the second and longer one later. My failing is I get mad when I start thinking, and without realizing I end up filling the story with lots of insults and swears and I need to rewrite it. So first about Chef Weenie number 1, for the head chef and his nimrodic attitude. As I stated before, my shift was Monday to Friday. Never found out if this was a company policy or just for the kitchen staff, but technically, we in the kitchen were supposed to work either one day every weekend or every other full weekend. The previous cool chef realized that only food delivered on weekends was 3 boxes of pastries, and MF, there was a constant stream of food orders I needed to either place or receive and quality check. So he circumvented and had me, the food receiver, work the days when there was actual food to receive. Now Chef Weenie comes around. He thinks I've politicked to get all weekends off and tells me, "You're coming in Sunday." I try to explain to him there's a logistical reason I have off weekends. He just interrupts me, claiming that my days of special treatments are over. And that even though there's no deliveries, just find something to do, clean the freezer, fridge or something. So I come in on Sunday. Now, I kept areas pretty clean on a daily basis, only falling behind by a day from time to time if I had heavy deliveries or something. 2 walk-in freezers, 1 walk-in fridge, 1 dry food storage room, and 1 soda syrup room. Except this Sunday, they were all recently cleaned with no issues, so spent 8 hours puttering around. Now, a side tangent about delivery schedule, the chef placed orders for the raw meat and seafood and fresh produce daily deliveries. I placed orders for twice a week ice cream deliveries, twice a week milk deliveries, and the big orders of bulk foods. I forget ice cream and milk schedule, but bulk orders were placed on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for Monday, Wednesday and Friday deliveries. Everything got ordered on Friday for the first delivery day of the following week. So anyway, back to the week. I've worked Sunday into Wednesday now, and it's before they added me to the printed schedule, so I go to the chef and ask what my 2 days off that week are gonna be. That's company policy, by the way, not entitlement, and he says, "Well, take Saturday off, there's no deliveries." I then ask about my second day off. He looks at the calendar and gets an, "Oh, fornicate me, look," starts stammering about all the orders that need to be placed or received both of those days. I agree that yes, there are a lot of deliveries and orders to be taken care of, but repeat that I need a second day off per company policy. He then starts in about how no one else here really knows how to place or take care of orders. I hold firm that's not my problem. I'm supposed to have 2 days off. The heads of dining for the entire campus get involved. Right away, the chef is asked, "Why did you have him work a day when there's no deliveries?" So A, I got the next day, Thursday, off. B, the chef had to scramble to get Friday orders placed for weekend, not even knowing where the order forms were. C, he did not schedule me for any more weekends, and yes, that's the shorter incident. Final update, the big game is over, no shiny things nearby to distract me, time to give final Chef Weenie story. Along with handling food deliveries, another duty of mine was to temperature check foods across different categories when they arrived. Red meat, dairy, seafood, poultry, some days I forgot a few due to late delivery, but most of the time had it all covered. Shortly after the useless dame he came in with was fired, Weenie got testy and said that from now on, every day I needed to record temperature delivery checks on something in the red meat, poultry, seafood, dairy and dry food categories. And yes, he actually wanted me to take a ketchup packet, wrap it around my thermometer and record the results. Dumb, but whatever. The problem I saw immediately was that not something from each of those categories arrived every day. So I asked if there was a day when one of those categories didn't get delivered. Did he want me to temperature check something already delivered and in the cooler? He said no, need to have record of temperatures at time of delivery, so only temperature check deliveries. Sounds reasonable, all good so far. Roughly 2 weeks later, he hands me a write-up, saying there are days where some of the categories are not being temperature checked and recorded daily. I bring up again that not everything is delivered every day, but what does he want me to do? His answer was, figure it out, just record something. In hindsight, I should have gone to the head of department or HR. Because essentially what he did was put me in a situation where if I say red meat was not delivered one day, I would get written up for not checking anything. Or if I wrote something down, he would write me up for recording false data. I'm not sure if the second option would be considered illegal or not, but I decided to record what I could. A few weeks later, I'm finishing putting away a large delivery, poke my head in the office to let the chef know I was going to go to lunch. He asks me to come in and then hands me my termination papers for not filling out complete temp logs every day, even though we both knew there was no way to do so with honest data. He told me to go get my stuff and get out. Okay, so here we go. The coat, hat and gloves used for prolonged work in the walk-in freezer, mine. The chain and padlock securing our delivery carts on the loading dock to keep them from being taken, mine. Logged into my employee account, deleted 2 things and emptied trash and recycling bin. First, the forms used to track how much every food product was used on a daily basis, as well as a 5-week record of what/how much was ordered when. I had created this years ago to not only make it easier to order, but also to see how much was used to see if we needed to order more or less of an item. Technically mine, gone. Second, I had created a full multi-month ice cream rotation for dinners. Most senior citizens there did not care for super fancy flavors, they liked the traditional ones. So, over the course of a month, I found out the most popular flavors and created a rotation menu, making sure flavors were rotated in and out to keep from getting boring. And I gave a copy to the guys in our production studio. Yes, this retirement home had its own TV channel like in a hotel, so everyday residents could tune into the campus TV channel and see not only dinner menu for that evening, but also ice cream menu for the evening. Before I created that, it was just grab some flavors an hour before dinner and the servers will just tell those who show up what the options are. It was deleted as well. So now this final epilogue here may sound like a revenge fantasy. I obviously wasn't there for this, but was told to me later by 3 people I knew who still worked there. They went through about 5 people in 3 months at my old position. They it being someone up from dishwasher to receiver, and pretty quick the worker would request to go back to dishwashing. What I heard was Weenie was essentially told by uppers, "We had a guy here who was good at this and enjoyed it. You did not like him, so you fired him." So he was unofficially punished. There was one cooking location we had that was really slow and boring, no one wanted to work there, he was transferred there, then I got petty, I went a few times as a visitor to have lunch with people I knew there. Not looking for trouble, just a visit. Once Weenie saw me in the cafeteria and decided to come over and be mouthy a bit. Well, now I'm a guest and I didn't say anything to him. Instead, I grabbed a cafe comment card, gave low marks and detailed how I was having lunch with a friend when this chef came over and tried to pick a fight. And I named him. After lunch, made sure I walked into the general area of his penance place, waited until he saw me and asked him how he liked his transfer. I have no more to say about the guy, he came in and I was let go pretty quick. I hope you enjoyed my novella. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.